A few hours before, Yamamoto's life turned upside down. With a brush in hand, he was focused on scrubbing the bathroom tiles. Right after, his attention turned to the drain, which he meticulously cleaned. That was our protagonist, a first-year university student. Amid his routine cleaning, he found it strangely satisfying to see the dirt vanish. Sitting on a stool, he was preparing to give the final touches, convinced he'd leave the bathroom spotless. Our hero thought cleaning was amazing because the more he put in effort, the cleaner everything got. Cleaning, according to him, always rewarded effort, unlike people who could be irrational and unfair. After finishing, he wiped his sweat and, smiling, told himself the feeling was incredible. However, when he looked at his phone, he was startled by the time, after all, he needed to head to his part-time job. Still, he noted that although night shifts paid better, the store was in a residential area and hardly got any customers at night, which made things quieter. And, well, already at work, with his face resting on his hand, he thought about how boring it all was. Sitting in front of the checkout computer, he reflected that even for a night shift, things were slower than usual, and he even wondered if the store could survive like that. But something on one of the security cameras caught his eye. He saw the silhouette of a customer entering the store. Soon, the customer approached the checkout and placed her purchases on the counter. However, he was quickly caught off guard when the customer called him by name. She remarked it had been a while since they last met, and he instantly recognized the voice with ease. Our hero was in shock, barely believing who was standing in front of him. It was her, a former classmate from high school. Her name was Hayashi. He couldn't believe she was living in Tokyo too. Hayashi then asked if he lived nearby, and he replied that he lived in a nearby apartment, returning the question. With a slight smile, she confirmed that, in a way, she did too. Next, she asked what university he was attending, and upon hearing it was University K, she complimented him, saying it was impressive and that he had always been smart. That interaction left him completely perplexed, and he wondered why on earth Hayashi was making small talk with him. While scanning her items, he noted that something like this would never have happened in high school. It had only been 4 months since graduation, and she seemed completely changed. His mind then took him back to their high school days, remembering what Hayashi was like back then. In his memory, she appeared in class, yawning, without caring about anything around her. Suddenly, an eraser fell from her desk. Quickly, he turned his face, looking at the object beside him. Meanwhile, the girl gazed absent-mindedly out the window, her face resting on her hand, completely unaware of her belongings. At that moment, a dilemma popped into his head, and he wondered if he should pick up the eraser or just ignore it. Muttering, he decided it was better to pick it up, imagining that if he didn't, she'd probably complain later. So he bent down and picked the eraser off the floor. However, when he turned around, he was startled, because she was staring at him with disgust. Still, he placed the eraser on her desk, saying she had dropped it. Her reaction, however, was pure disdain. Our hero was completely bewildered by her response and wondered what was wrong with that girl. Despite everything, he remembered that in high school she had a pretty face, lots of friends, and was always popular, with boys constantly confessing to her. He even recalled witnessing one of those confessions get rejected. In his memories, a boy confessed to Hayashi. Yamamoto, on the other hand, said he could never understand what others saw in her. The boy who confessed seemed extremely shy, anxiously waiting for a response. Her reaction, however, was full of scorn. She placed her hand on her hip and let out a frustrated scream, leaving the boy completely stunned. Because of such attitudes, at some point, she earned the nickname the Arrogant Queen. Back to the present, he concluded he had no good memories of her and that it was best not to get involved. So, sticking strictly to his job, he asked if she needed a bag. However, glancing away for a moment, something caught his attention. Her wrist revealed bruises. Shocked by what he saw, he gestured toward her arm. Caught off guard, Hayashi quickly grabbed it, trying to hide the marks. Worried, he asked what had happened to her arm. She, in turn, just looked away, remaining silent and visibly uncomfortable. Nervously, she gripped the sleeve of her shirt tightly. In his thoughts, he found it odd that she was wearing long sleeves in the middle of summer. He concluded that it wasn't normal and that she was probably hiding something even worse underneath. His concern grew, and he was sure that whatever was hidden under that blouse had to be more serious. Then, with a melancholic smile, she confessed that she had been hit and that the one responsible was her boyfriend. The revelation left him completely paralyzed. Trying to find out more, he asked about her boyfriend. Soon, she explained that he was at home and that they lived together. However, Hayashi didn't seem to care, and, acting like her old self, turned her face away, annoyed by his questions. Then she scolded him, saying he always talked too much. Without saying another word, she turned and walked toward the exit, leaving him behind. With that, he concluded with a sigh that she always hated him, and he tried not to care about the situation. However, her words echoed in his mind. He remembered how she had confessed her boyfriend hit her and wondered why, of all people she had told him that. Then it hit him. He asked himself if the feared queen had shown him a vulnerable side, but he soon panicked upon realizing she was going back home, fearing her boyfriend might hurt her again. Driven by impulse, he called out to her with a hesitant voice. Then he leaned over the counter and shouted for her to stop. Determined, he made an unexpected offer, telling her to stay at his place that night. Her reaction, however, was filled with anger, and upon noticing his expression, she misinterpreted everything, thinking he had ulterior motives, when in fact, he only wanted to help. With his hands raised in surrender, he tried to explain, assuring her he wouldn't do anything and that if she didn't trust him, he'd give her his spare key and spend the night at a cyber cafe. Our hero simply insisted that she not go back home that night, or better yet, that she look for her parents and return to their house. But the girl revealed that her parents had disowned her, which left him completely shocked. She then explained that when she told them she'd be living with her boyfriend, her parents flipped out and threatened to cut her off. Because of that, she ended up dropping out of college. With that, a heavy silence fell over the place as the two remained standing in front of the counter. Still, letting out a sigh, he insisted that she shouldn't go back home that night. He then said he'd get the spare key and would also send her the address by text. However, to his surprise, she declined, saying she didn't need the key, which left him confused. Hayashi then said she would wait, and with her head down, she finally clarified that she would wait until his shift ended. As she spoke, her hands nervously twisted a lock of her hair, revealing her anxiety. Then, he said his shift would end in about an hour and suggested she read a magazine or something to pass the time. While waiting, he remembered how Hayashi was in high school, the queen, who was always surrounded by people and seemed loved by everyone. However, he thought that image didn't match the girl standing there now. The sight of the bruises on her arm came back to his mind. It left him completely speechless. Shortly after, they arrived at the building where he lived. Upon entering, he bragged about how tidy the place was, but she, with her usual bluntness, commented that it looked more like empty. He then asked her to sit and said he would get her some barley tea. As the ice cracked in the glass, he thought that, even at that moment, Hayashi's presence in his room felt completely unreal. Soon he concluded that even though everything had happened naturally, the situation still made him extremely nervous, even if he had no intention of doing anything with her. She then picked up the glass and drank the barley tea in a quick gulp. Breaking the silence, Hayashi remarked with a slight smile that she couldn't believe she now owed him a favor. He, on the other hand, said he didn't see it that way, since he had just done what anyone would have done. She then started to open up and said they both needed time to cool off. Trying to understand better, he then asked if her boyfriend was just in a bad mood. With a somber expression, she confirmed, explaining that he didn't usually hit her, and that it only happened when things went badly at work, so she said she should support him better. Surprised, our hero commented that this wasn't something the Hayashi from school would have said. Annoyed, she told him to shut up, saying people change. Her words made him thoughtful, and he reflected on her idea of hoping it was just a bad day. With that, he said that if her story was really true, maybe he shouldn't have told her not to go home. However, ignoring his thoughts, he said she could spend the night there. Surprised, she thanked him. Still, teasing him, she remarked that he too was saying things he never would have in high school. She then asked if she could use his shower, and he agreed. Next, she wanted to know if he had anything she could wear, but he replied that he only had men's clothes. While she went to the bathroom, he remained seated at the table, waiting in silence. Suddenly, the sound of the shower began to echo through the apartment. The running water made him imagine Hayashi in the shower. A drop of sweat ran down his face, and he couldn't hide how nervous he felt. The image of the queen from school invaded his mind, and he could hardly believe Hayashi was showering in his house. Yamamoto then looked at his watch and thought that maybe he should change too. His thoughts, however, were interrupted when Hayashi stepped out of the bathroom, saying the shower had been really good. He turned and, visibly flustered, could only stammer. Smiling as she dried her hair with a towel, she commented that his bathroom was way too clean. However, when he glanced downward, his eyes widened in pure shock at what he saw, because her legs, now exposed, were covered in multiple bruises. He then remarked regretfully that it looked really bad. Hayashi, in turn, just said her boyfriend was a lost cause. Worried, he pointed out that the bruises looked old. Her response, however, was cold and defensive. With a distant look, she just asked what that mattered. Her reaction was a clear warning sign, and he, holding his glass, understood that look meant not to press the subject. Even so, he decided he needed to say something and remarked that she shouldn't be with someone like that. She then fired back, asking what he could possibly know about her situation. He backed off a bit, saying he didn't know anything, and that it was just his opinion. and the decision to listen or not was entirely hers. Still, with his eyes closed, he explained that if something happened to her, people would ask why he didn't stop her, and the blame would fall on him. And while she clenched her teeth, he stated he was saying it for her own good. With a serious expression, he asked if she really still wanted to support someone who hit her when stressed. With that, he wondered when she had become that way. Our hero remembered how he used to hate her, but now saw that few people could live so selflessly, concluding that she was just being used. Imagining it would all be for nothing, he was suddenly overcome with anger. Despite everything, he said that if she still wanted to go back, he wouldn't stop her. Hearing his words, Hayashi just looked away. Immediately, he regretted what he had said. He thought it was a reflex and wondered if he had gone too far. Sure, she would definitely get upset. Even so, he resigned himself to the situation, thinking that if she didn't take his words seriously, there was nothing else he could do. Then, with a sad smile, hugging her knees, Hayashi agreed that it would all be awful. Changing the subject, he said he was getting sleepy and offered his bed for her to sleep in, saying he'd sleep on the floor. She, in turn, thanked him as she got under the covers. As he moved away, he watched her. Our hero advised her not to rush, saying she should take some time to think about everything. She then teased him, saying he sounded like an enlightened monk and that it was no wonder he never got a girlfriend. He, in turn, wondered if that was why he was still single. Without saying another word, he pulled the curtain, leaving the room in complete darkness. A short while later, he threw himself on the floor and even in the cold began to fall asleep. The night went on and the two remained in their separate spaces. However, Yamamoto soon muttered that there was no way he could fall asleep. Suddenly, Hayashi turned and looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. She then called out to him, breaking the silence of the room. Next, she turned toward him and, in a soft voice, made a shocking suggestion, asking if he wanted to do it. Hearing that, Yamamoto's eyes widened. He panicked, stammering and asking what she meant by it. Desperate, he explained that he had only let her stay on impulse and that he hadn't intended anything else. Sweating cold, he wondered if she was just messing with him. Suddenly, his body was wrapped in an unexpected hug and he let out a scream. Then, Hayashi started laughing and surprised, he asked what she was doing. With a subtle movement, she slid her leg over his, getting even closer. Completely confused, he asked if she had hugged him just to see if he was awake. Totally embarrassed, he asked who had given her permission to hug him, but whispering in his ear, she said it was just a hug. He considered for a moment mentioning her boyfriend, but quickly realized it wasn't the right time and swallowed the thought. Breaking the silence, Hayashi looked him straight in the eyes and asked if he was a virgin. The question caught him off guard and embarrassed, he looked away, unsure how to answer. Trying to keep his composure, he denied it, but she immediately called him a liar. Still, she said his reaction was, in a way, cute. Completely embarrassed, he told her to shut up, and on impulse, he grabbed her wrist. His expression, however, turned serious. Hayashi then started to open up, saying her boyfriend wasn't always like that, and that he used to be kind and attentive, doing everything she wanted. She went on, explaining that everything changed once they started living together. The poor girl confessed that he began hitting her whenever his mood shifted, even when it wasn't because of work. She tried to justify it, saying his feelings were just confused. A painful memory then came to mind, where he humiliated her for not earning money. But when she offered to work, he belittled her, questioning what someone with only a high school diploma could even do. After the confession, a heavy silence fell over the room. Then, Hayashi remarked that it wasn't a very fun story and with a melancholic smile told him to go to sleep. Ignoring her suggestion, Yamamoto simply said, with empathy, that she had been through a lot. His words caught her completely off guard and her eyes widened in shock. Confused, she asked what he had said, but Yamamoto, embarrassed, asked her to forget it. However, she insisted, asking him to repeat it, but he just sighed and told her to go to sleep. With a faint smile, she called him a lost cause, and he, still flustered, retorted, asking who she thought she was. His face turned bright red, and he couldn't hide how embarrassed he was. A genuine smile then formed on the girl's lips. Getting closer to him, she whispered that it had been a long time since she had heard something like that, and so, unexpectedly, the two began living together. The next morning, our hero groaned as he slowly woke up. As he sat up, he wondered why he was sleeping on the floor. Suddenly, he was surprised, and his gaze was immediately drawn to the girl lying next to him. He saw Hayashi sleeping soundly, and the memories of the previous night came rushing back. With a sigh, he remembered why he was in that situation. Watching her peaceful face, he couldn't help but think how drastically she had changed since their high school days. A little later, the sound of vegetables sizzling in the pan broke the morning silence. The noise in the kitchen woke Hayashi, who grumbled and stretched slowly. Still groggy, she watched him in the kitchen, and little by little, the memories of the previous night came back to her. Tired, she wished him good morning and complained that her whole body was sore from sleeping on the floor. He, in turn, said he had insisted that she use the bed and that there was no need for such sacrifice on her part. Curious about the smell, she came closer and asked if he was making yakisoba, and he confirmed. Surprised, she asked if he knew how to cook. He modestly replied that he knew a little and asked her to wait as the food was almost ready. Still a bit skeptical, she asked again if he was sure. Shortly after, 2 steaming plates of yakisoba were served on the table. The noodles looked delicious. Without hesitation, Hayashi grabbed a generous portion and started eating enthusiastically. With her cheeks full, she chewed eagerly and, with shining eyes, said it was amazing. Distracted with his phone, he thanked her for the compliment, but soon after teased her, saying she had terrible manners. He then apologized, explaining that the habit of using his phone during meals came from living alone for so long. After finishing her meal, with hands clasped in a gesture of gratitude, she thanked him for the food, saying it was really good. He, however, tried to downplay the compliment, saying he had just followed the instructions on the package. Annoyed, she scolded him, telling him not to ruin the compliment she had just given, and he, embarrassed, apologized. Next, she offered to wash the dishes, but he stopped her, saying she was a guest. Hayashi insisted, saying it was her way of paying for the food and shelter, but he, irritated, told her to shut up, saying it was unnecessary. Changing the subject, the girl asked if he had a hair tie, but he said no, though he mentioned having rubber bands if she wanted. She complained, asking if he knew what happened when you tied your hair with a rubber band, explaining that it hurt and pulled out strands. He defended himself, saying he had no way of knowing, and offered plastic ties instead. And with that, she ended up accepting. Holding the elastic with her mouth, she began tying her hair into a ponytail. Meanwhile, Yamamoto watched her in silence. After that, she went to the kitchen and started washing the dishes. Lying down, he looked at his phone, but his thoughts were on her, and he wished she could at least relax while she was there. Shortly after, the two sat at the table, and he said it was time to talk about the next steps. With a serious expression, he stated that, in the end, everything would depend on what she wanted to do. Head down, she agreed, but confessed she was afraid of regretting making the wrong choice. He then advised her to try to look at the situation objectively to decide what she wanted, so there wouldn't be regrets. However, she asked how he could be so sure of that. She explained that it wasn't always possible to see things objectively, and that sometimes people were just overwhelmed by emotion. With teary eyes, she concluded it was impossible to say someone would never regret a decision. Our hero disagreed, saying it wasn't impossible, but she insisted it was. He then reassured her, promising she would be okay, but skeptically, she asked how he could know that, and well, his answer left her flustered, as he simply said it was easy, and with a thumbs up, he declared that's exactly why he was there. With that, an awkward silence settled between them. Realizing he might have overdone it, a bead of sweat began to roll down his face. He then composed himself and explained that if she was afraid to decide alone, she should talk to someone, and offered to listen. Teasing him, she said that didn't suit him at all, and he almost seemed like someone trustworthy. However, he immediately said he was just being selfish and trying to impose his own opinions. Then, she covered her mouth with her hand and commented that he was always so indirect. He then proposed that they think things through together and asked her to first tell him about her relationship, even if it was hard. And so, Hayashi began telling everything that had happened since she moved to Tokyo. Though she tried to make a few jokes to ease the tension, her story was far from amusing. By the end of the story, a forced smile appeared on her face, and he couldn't understand why that reaction after telling such tragedy. She then explained that her boyfriend wasn't always angry, and that he also apologized. With that, our hero explained that domestic violence followed a cycle. He then explained that it all started with constant irritation. Then came the violent outburst, and finally, the regret. Always too late to fix anything. Surprised, she asked how he knew so much about that, and he revealed he had done some research while she was washing the dishes. He then asked if she had ever talked to anyone else about it, but she confessed he was the first. Remembering how she seemed to have so many friends in school, he asked where her phone was. With a downcast look, she said she didn't have one, explaining that her boyfriend always insisted it wasn't necessary since she just needed to have him around. The revelation made him uneasy, and he asked if her boyfriend had broken it. She then confessed that because of that, she had lost all her contacts, and since he wouldn't let her have a new phone, she felt completely trapped. Hearing that, rage took over Yamamoto and his fists clenched tightly on the table. He reflected that initially his intention was only to intervene to ease his own conscience in case something happened to her. But in that moment, his perspective had completely changed. With unshakable determination, he decided that no matter the cost, even if she ended up hating him for it, Hayashi needed to break up with that guy. Downplaying the seriousness of the situation, she tried to justify the boyfriend's behavior, saying that although he hit her sometimes, he also had a sweet side and could be really cute. Hearing that, our hero wondered how he could convince her. However, to his complete surprise, Hayashi announced she was thinking of breaking up with him. him and explained that talking to him had helped her see everything in a new light. Her sudden decision completely caught him off guard. She then agreed with him, concluding that her boyfriend was just using her to feed his own sense of ownership. And well, with her decision made, he said that if she was sure, the next step would be to hear his suggestion. He quickly explained that from what he'd read about how abusers clung to their victims, he didn't think her boyfriend would accept the breakup quietly. His warning terrified her, and she shrank at the thought that he might retaliate. He then said he had a proposal, and the goal was to make the ex-boyfriend not want anything to do with her anymore. Worried, she asked if he was planning to hurt her ex or something like that, saying it would be too much. But he said first, there were places they needed to go, starting with a hospital, and then to the police station. In disbelief, she asked if his proposal really involved the police. He then explained that they would file a report and detailed his reasoning, stating that if the ex-boyfriend was under police watch and had a record, he wouldn't be able to get close to her. However, Hayashi hesitated, asking him to wait and questioning if they really needed to go that far. He, in turn, began listing reasons, reminding her that her ex had left bruises all over her body and made her cut ties with everyone, including her parents, who had disowned her because of him. Our hero emphasized that the ex had destroyed her phone, leaving her completely isolated with the clear intent to imprison her. With that, he confronted her directly, asking if, even after all that, she still didn't want to involve the police. A heavy silence settled in the room, and Hayashi remained with her head down. Yamamoto watched her, patiently waiting for an answer. However, the bruises on her legs seemed even heavier in that moment, and he confronted her, asking if she hadn't said she was ready to leave him. She argued that breaking up and pressing charges were two very different things, and well, to her surprise, he simply agreed, saying he understood, and that they wouldn't go to the police, which left her stunned. Our hero then explained that he was just someone she was talking to, and even if he thought it was the right move, it was natural, that she felt differently. Hayashi agreed, and asked that, likewise, if something bothered him, he should just say it just as she had. He then said that, in that case, he asked that she take what he said a little less seriously. With that, the girl also said he could speak up if there was ever something about her that bothered him. With that, he said doing things that way was more efficient. She then said he could have phrased that a bit more gently, but he, with his completely robotic way, asked what that would even sound like. Anyway, he clarified that they wouldn't go to the police for now, since it wouldn't make sense if it only caused her more pain, at which she replied that he should have said that from the start. He then continued, suggesting she stay at his place for a while. Immediately, she pulled away, misinterpreting his intentions and asking if that's what he had wanted all along, leaving him confused about what she meant. Annoyed, she called him pathetic, and he, in turn, shouted, asking what she thought he was trying to do. He then explained his logic, reminding her that since she lived with her ex, she couldn't just go back there, which made her realize her mistake. Next, he mentioned that her ex was probably already looking for her like a maniac at that very moment. He said that was exactly why he had made that suggestion and recommended she not leave the apartment for a while, to which she reluctantly agreed. He then said there was one more thing, something she would need to do even if she didn't like it, and she curiously asked what it was. Suddenly, her eyes widened. In his mind, Yamamoto hoped she would understand the situation, because if she did, everything would go much faster. Completely tense, Hayashi nervously gestured as she covered her chest with her hands, but then she made it clear she wouldn't mind. After all, in the end, he was just trying to help, and that was enough for her to accept it. Hearing that, Yamamoto immediately realized she was misunderstanding everything. He realized that once again, she had gotten the whole situation wrong. Then, she began to state her conclusion, saying that she already knew what he wanted and accused him of wanting full access to her body. He, in turn, told her to stop talking nonsense, but she, irritated, asked what was so stupid about what she said. He then confronted her, reminding her how she had been all over him before they slept, and with that, asked if she was fine with one night, but couldn't deal with it every day. A little embarrassed, he then wondered if maybe she just hated being treated like an object, and concluded, head down, that his theory was probably right. He then advised her not to agree to something she didn't want to do, which left her confused. And pointing at her, Yamamoto finally clarified what he meant. He gestured toward her arm, resting on the table, covered in bruises. He then stated that she needed to go to the hospital. Then it finally clicked, and she understood the true meaning of his words. With her hands together, she finally agreed. Even so, he couldn't help but wonder why her voice sounded a bit disappointed. As they headed to the hospital, he concluded he would probably never understand how the Queen's mind worked. The medical report made it clear how serious the situation was, pointing to bruises scattered across her body and a torn ligament in her wrist that required immediate attention. After leaving the hospital, the two walked silently along the sidewalk. The atmosphere between them was heavy. Yamamoto recalled how, at the hospital, Hayashi tried to dodge the doctor's questions about the origin of her injuries. He realized she was trying to avoid the subject and leave as quickly as possible, concluding she still felt intimidated because of her ex-boyfriend. With that, he wondered if it was right to just let things go like that. But he decided it wasn't. After all, she clearly had no intention of pressing charges. Changing the subject, he commented that her clothes looked too warm for the weather. A bit awkwardly, she agreed. Determined to help her in another way, he said they were going shopping since she would need some things. In his thoughts, he concluded the best thing he could do was focus on helping her, so he'd be ready in case she changed her mind. Worried, she brought up the money issue, but he reassured her, saying he had a bit saved, though he warned he wouldn't be able to buy her everything. Then, she immediately promised she'd pay him back for anything she needed, even if she didn't know when that would be. However, with a gentle smile, he said it was no problem at all. Shortly after, they were already in a store, and Hayashi was looking at a dress. Then, she appeared in the lingerie section, cheerfully holding a few bras, which left Yamamoto completely flustered. The next morning, while birds chirped outside, Hayashi continued to sleep soundly. Yamamoto, on the other hand, woke up on the floor, groaning from the back pain of sleeping on the floor again. With that, he said he really needed to buy a futon. He got up and, looking at the closet, thought he still had time before his classes and could use it to do a quick morning cleaning. However, his expression changed when he looked at his new roommate and he quickly reconsidered his plan. He decided it was better to skip the cleaning and instead head to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Meanwhile, still in bed, Hayashi turned over, completely oblivious to the world. Soon, the sound of sausages frying in the pan echoed through the apartment. He then prepared a full meal and left it on the table with a note, indicating it was for her. Watching her sleep peacefully, he said she should sleep as much as she wanted to recover. While walking to college, Yamamoto thought that for someone whose hobby was cleaning, skipping the morning routine felt completely wrong. Later on the way back, he carried shopping bags, including a futon, and declared that with it, he'd finally get a good night's sleep. Suddenly, as he approached home, a familiar smell caught his attention. He realized the scent was coming from his apartment and wondered if it was food. Opening the door, he announced that he was home. To his surprise, he found Hayashi in the kitchen, wearing an apron and preparing dinner. She greeted him warmly. Watching her, he thought to himself how glad he was that he bought her that hair tie. The girl then asked if he liked hamburger steak. Surprised by the gesture, he said she didn't need to wait for him to cook and that he could have made dinner when he got home. But Hayashi replied that since she was staying there, cooking was the least she could do. Next, with a quick and skillful motion, she flipped the hamburger steak in the pan. Impressed, Yamamoto said she was really good at it, and she explained she'd had enough practice. Shortly after, she placed the plate in front of him and asked what he thought. Impatient, she pressed, asking directly if he liked hamburger steak or not. And, well, he replied that he didn't hate it. With that, she said that was a pretty evasive answer. As he stepped away, she called him, and he, in turn, asked what she wanted. While putting away his groceries, the girl said she wanted to talk about something after dinner. A moment later, our hero seemed to sense something was off. Looking at the plate in front of him, a doubt crossed his mind. He wondered if he had even bought ground beef. Hayashi, however, seemed unaware of his thoughts, and as she tied her hair back, she let out a sigh of relief for finishing the task. Ignoring his doubts, he joined her at the table, and Hayashi, smiling, said they should start eating. With chopsticks in hand, he cut a piece of the steak. As he chewed the first bite, Hayashi watched him anxiously, eager to know what he thought. After a moment of suspense, he finally gave his verdict, saying it was good. The compliment visibly made her happy. Soon after, the plates were empty and dinner came to an end. She immediately got up and began clearing the dishes, saying she would wash them. He tried to stop her, but she insisted she didn't need help, explaining she wanted to move around a bit and would take care of the chores. And so she went to the kitchen. Then he asked if she had gone out that day. However, she just kept washing the dishes in silence as the water ran in the sink. He immediately regretted his tone, realizing it sounded like a possessive boyfriend. He tried to correct himself, saying that wasn't what he meant, but Hayashi turned to him with a challenging look and asked if he had a problem with that. Tension filled the air. He then said he had no problem at all, but that whether or not she followed his advice was entirely up to her. Our hero explained that going out and risking running into her ex again was a very reckless move, and well, upon hearing that, she made it clear he would never understand, and he admitted he truly didn't get what she was going through, even if he tried. Angry, she turned and yelled that if he didn't understand, then he shouldn't interfere. Her outburst left a heavy silence in the air, and Yamamoto just sat there, his back to her. Soon, Hayashi composed herself, and without saying anything else, she finished washing the dishes and set them out to dry. Then, she approached him and sat beside him, breaking the tension that had built up. Regretful, she apologized, admitting she was being stubborn. He, however, disagreed, saying he was the one who had made a mistake. Yamamoto explained that he should have asked her earlier in the morning instead of assuming he'd take care of the shopping alone. Gently, she said he didn't need to apologize for that. He then asked where she got money for the meat, and she explained she had used what little she had left from her ex. She then confessed she had stopped by the supermarket and was afraid he'd get mad if he found out she went out. The girl asked if that made sense, and he just nodded. Then she began to explain, saying her ex used to get mad at everything, and if he was in a bad mood, he'd find any excuse to hit her. She recalled how if she threw away the trash he left on the floor, he'd yell, asking why she threw it away without asking. But if she did ask, he'd complain she shouldn't need to ask something so obvious. Despite everything, she concluded that he always stayed quiet while eating, and that was the only moment of peace she had. Because of that, she thought that if she made dinner for Yamamoto too, maybe he'd forget to scold her while eating, just like her ex. He then asked what was so important that she risked going out, and, well, she then revealed that's what she wanted to talk about. She wanted to get a part-time job. Upon hearing that, he remained silent, but soon said he thought working part-time was a good thing, though maybe it wasn't the right time. And with that, Hayashi said she figured he'd say that. He asked why she wanted a job so badly, and she explained that if she couldn't earn money, she'd just be a burden on him. Although she had promised to pay him back someday, she didn't know when that would be possible. And with that, she said in a few months, she'd probably use up all his savings, and that in the end, she just didn't want to keep being a burden. Our hero listened in silence, and then said he understood how she felt, but warned her that if something happened, it would be too late. With that, Hayashi concluded there was no other way. She then said that for now, that was all she could do, and that if her ex found her because of it, so be it. Her response left him completely shocked, and he tried to understand exactly what she meant by that, noting there were hundreds of ways to avoid that risk. He couldn't understand. The queen's logic was something his mind simply couldn't process. He tried to explain that avoiding the risk was incredibly simple, and that all she needed to do was stay in the apartment until things calmed down. In his thoughts, he convinced himself Hayashi must also understand that. However, he wondered if she was really doing all that just for him, concluding that putting herself in danger like that was basically self-destructive behavior. Meanwhile, Hayashi remained silent with a distant look in her eyes. The marks on her legs served as a constant reminder of the violence she had endured. Soon, he reflected on everything she had been through, realizing the abuse went beyond violence, involving control and manipulation. It was strange to see someone who once seemed so confident now, so fragile and lost. He remembered that it had only been 4 months since graduation, and 3 since college started. And in that short time, she met her boyfriend and moved in with him. The speed at which everything had happened left him perplexed, and he wondered what the hell that guy had done to her. Then he picked up his phone and asked her to take a look. She approached and looked at the screen. And, well, the phone showed the balance of his bank account, 1.5 million yen. He explained that he'd been saving since high school, putting away the money from his part-time jobs, and since he didn't buy many things, the money simply added up. Then he showed her his budget app. He explained that his income came from his scholarship and part-time jobs, and his rent was covered by his parents. Our hero said that while counting the scholarship as income was debatable, he managed to save money every month, and with her there, the only thing that would really increase was the food bill. With that, he concluded that since she planned to pay him back eventually, helping her wasn't a big deal, and that basically she didn't need to get a job. She, however, argued that it was his money, that he had earned it for his own use, but he said he didn't mind using it for her. Hayashi insisted there was no reason for him to spend his money on her, but he countered that there was, which made her call him a liar again, but he denied lying. She, however, snapped, yelling that he was, and well, that left a heavy silence hanging in the air. Desperate, she said he had no reason to take her in or keep her there, and that he would only end up caught in whatever mess she brought along. Head down, she seemed to agree with her own fears, admitting that she had nothing left. Meanwhile, Yamamoto just watched her despair in silence. In his thoughts, he reflected that he had already suspected her reason for wanting a job for his sake wasn't the whole truth. Our hero concluded that maybe it was partially true, but the other half, the reason she was willing to risk working, was to regain the dignity that had been taken from her. Then he said that yes, there was a reason why he wanted her there. She, however, called him a liar, but he insisted he wasn't lying. He then confronted her, asking if she hadn't been doing the house chores. And, well, that simple question made her stop yelling. He explained that he didn't hate cleaning, but with school and work, the mess piled up, and it helped to have someone take care of it. Incredulous, she asked if he was serious, and he, with a firm look, said he was a man of his word. He then detailed his obsession with cleaning, explaining that if he saw a bit of dust on the TV, he'd clean clean the whole room. And if he spotted water stains on the washing machine, he'd scrub the whole drum. But he had college and a part-time job, which meant he simply didn't have enough time to do everything. She then asked if he was saying that if she took care of the cleaning, everything would be solved, but he immediately yelled that she was wrong. Surprised, she asked what he meant. And well, he said that cleaning was his job. Our hero explained that it wasn't something sacred, but that cleaning was his hobby and his life's purpose. That statement left her completely speechless. He then explained that if she did everything except clean, he could focus 100% on his passion, and that was more than enough reason for him to lend her money. Even though she thought that was a stupid reason, he changed the subject, saying the hamburger steak was great and thanked her for the meal. Meanwhile, Hayashi wondered what the hell had just happened. Then she said maybe she would cause problems, but he impatiently said that sharing a home was exactly about dealing with that kind of thing together. Head down, she finally gave in, agreeing to stay and saying that for now she wouldn't look for a job. Suddenly, she called out to him, and out of nowhere, she made an unexpected proposal, saying she'd make him a bento for school, which left him confused, not quite understanding the reason for the sudden offer. She explained that the idea was to cut down on food costs and that she'd prepare lunch for both of them, which made sense to him. He agreed, saying it would definitely be cheaper than the cafeteria and that there was no reason to waste money. With that, he accepted the offer, saying he appreciated the gesture. However, a moment later, she hesitated, seeming like she wanted to say something more, and he, curious, encouraged her to continue. Then she shyly said she wanted to know what he liked, but quickly clarified she meant food. And, well, the way she asked caught him off guard, and his heart skipped a beat for a moment. He was visibly confused by his own reaction, not understanding why he was so shaken by a simple question. Later, he continued reflecting on what had happened, wondering if something had stirred inside him. On the third day of their coexistence, Yamamoto woke up on his new futon, surprised and relieved that his body didn't ache, mentally thanking himself for buying that beauty. Looking at his phone, he saw it was only 4:30 in the morning and decided not to wake her, since that would be rude. Despite the early hour, his desire to clean took over, and he started thinking about a place he could clean quietly. His search for a silent spot led to only one conclusion: the bathroom. Shortly after, Hayashi finally woke up, and, while stretching, sleepily greeted him. "Good morning." From the bathroom, he responded to her greeting. Then she got ready for the day, putting toothpaste on her brush. And in front of the mirror, she began brushing her teeth peacefully. While getting ready, she asked if he always got up that early, and he confirmed that he usually did. While sipping something, she remarked that he always woke up early. He, a bit surprised, said she had just repeated the same thing seconds earlier. Our hero then concluded that she was probably still a little sleepy. Next, she recalled that he always arrived early back in high school too, and he simply confirmed. While brushing her hair, she said he was really a weirdo, and he asked if it was just because he woke up early. She then said she'd start making breakfast and asked him to wait in the living room. A short while later, while the food was finishing, he sat in front of the TV to watch the morning news. Then, seeing him approach, Hayashi asked what he was doing. Yamamoto said he knew how to carry his own plate, stressing that it was his place and she was the guest. He then asked her not to go out of her way like that. Suddenly, she snapped, saying he was really annoying, then yelled at him to just sit down and shut up. Completely confused by her reaction, our hero wondered why she got so angry. Once again, he said he didn't really understand that girl, but thanked her for the food. Then, he asked Hayashi to give him the bathroom for a second, since he needed to change, but she said he could just change right there. He, in turn, thought she probably wouldn't want to see him in his underwear, but remembering she had lived with a guy before, he concluded she was probably used to seeing men undressed. With that, he said he'd change in the bathroom, thinking he should have done that from the start. Then, he took off his shirt, and right after, he put his dirty clothes in the washing machine. Suddenly, the door opened and Hayashi announced his lunch was ready, which made him scream in surprise. At the door, she watched as he finished getting dressed. Then, finally, our hero thanked her for the food. Next, she asked what he was doing, and he, visibly flustered, said he was just getting dressed. Hayashi then asked why he had screamed, and Yamamoto explained it was because she opened the door so suddenly. Annoyed, she called him rude, and he, in turn, told her to shut up. Despite the argument, a smug smile formed on her lips. Then, she stepped closer and suggested that, deep down, he only acted that way because he didn't want to be seen naked by her. Cornered, he asked if she had a problem with that, to which she said no, but quickly added seductively that she wouldn't have any problem showing her body to him. Completely confused, the fool asked what kind of weird competition that was, and dodging the awkward situation, he grabbed his lunch, thanked her, and said he was heading to class. As he walked away, she smiled and mentioned that she had packed something he liked in the bento. Surprised, he just awkwardly thanked her. While putting on his backpack, he told her he had work that day and would be back late, and she simply said she understood. However, before leaving, he let out a long sigh. The gesture caught her attention, and she asked what that was about. about, and he explained that he was just thinking about how annoying work was. Her reaction showed surprise, and she said she didn't expect him to complain, thinking he always took everything seriously. But he said that, in fact, he did. However, the poor guy clarified that since the job paid poorly, sometimes he really didn't feel like going. His honesty made her smile softly. With that, he asked what was so funny, and she, still smiling, replied, "It was nothing, but that even though he complained about work, he seemed much more willing and eager to help her." He, in turn, said that was obvious. After all, her food was amazing. Hearing that, she looked visibly happy. He then said goodbye, saying he was heading out, and she wished him a good day. Outside, the rain had already stopped. As he walked, he looked at his reflection in a puddle and thought the day would be hot again. Soon, he was already inside a crowded train on his way to college. However, amid the crowd, his thoughts turned to Hayashi. Honestly, he didn't believe time would solve her problems, and he concluded the situation didn't look good. He imagined that if too much time passed and she encountered her ex again, the guy would be even more bitter and violent than before. In his mind, the scene grew even darker, as he was sure that if the ex dragged her back, the control and abuse would only get worse. On top of that, he realized another problem. The more time passed, the harder it would be to get help from the police. He could even picture the scene at the police station, with an officer asking why the assault had been reported months after it happened, and why they hadn't sought help sooner. Despite that, he concluded that reporting the incident as soon as possible was still the best option. However, he realized he had already messed everything up since he had agreed not to involve the police. He knew that if he brought it up again, she would simply reject the idea. With that, he thought that if he couldn't be the one to do it, maybe someone else could. And so, already in his classroom, his gaze scanned the room in search of a solution. His eyes then landed on a group of girls chatting cheerfully. With that, he remembered Kasahara Akari, his former high school classmate and Hayashi's best friend. He thought she would be the most suitable person for that task. However, even though they studied at the same university, they had never spoken. Besides, he was worried that she might still be in contact with Hayashi's boyfriend. Our hero couldn't just bring up the subject out of nowhere. With his plan in mind, Yamamoto's gaze was fixed on Kasahara, who was cheerfully chatting with her friends on the other side of the classroom. However, a strong hesitation overcame him. He reflected that although his coexistence with the arrogant queen had been surprisingly comfortable, the idea of asking an old classmate for help made him uneasy. After all, he clearly remembered how she belonged to the school's social elite, being even more popular among the boys than Hayashi herself. On the other hand, his own image at school was far from positive. Despite his calm appearance nowadays, he recalled how he was seen as a troublemaker. That reputation came from the many times he had made girls cry with his behavior, receiving the worst insults without caring. Because of that history, he came to the bitter conclusion that someone like him could never have a normal conversation with someone like Kasahara. Faced with that reality, a heavy sigh escaped his lips. After all, that plan simply wouldn't work, which made him start thinking about a new approach to the situation. Later, the vibrant and chaotic sound of the university cafeteria brought him back to the present. That's when, upon opening the bento Hayashi had prepared, he came across a carefully arranged meal. His attention was then caught by a specific detail in the food. As he picked up with his chopsticks a small sausage cut in the shape of an octopus, immediately an image of Hayashi in the kitchen appeared in his mind, where she was carefully making the little cuts with great dedication. And well, that thoughtful gesture brought a slight smile to his face. With that, he concluded that this new and strange routine was, somehow, very nice. However, as he walked back home that night, his worries returned. He admitted that he hadn't come up with a new plan yet, but he felt there had to be a solution. From the kitchen, Hayashi turned around and greeted him, welcoming him home. She then said she would start heating up dinner, and he, still near the door, nodded in agreement. She, from the kitchen, suggested that he take a bath first to relax, to which he agreed. However, upon reaching his room, something caught his attention, because on his bed there was a change of clean clothes, neatly folded. A little while later, while relaxing in the bathtub, he stated that the water was at the perfect temperature. After getting out of the bath and while drying his hair, Hayashi informed him that the food was ready, and he simply thanked her for the gesture. On the table, a full and well-served dinner awaited him. Completely embarrassed, he wondered if she wasn't pampering him too much with all that care. Our hero remarked that it all seemed a bit much, saying that all he had done was come home. However, she quickly explained that this was the kind of treatment she used to have in her old home. And, well, the mention of her former home made him uncomfortable, and he wished she would stop bringing it up, as it always left him unsure of how to respond. However, she stated that actually she was the one who was surprised, and confessed that even though he had asked her not to, she had intended to tidy up the apartment. But she soon discovered that the place was spotless to an almost scary level, without a single speck of dust. He then remarked that she really knew how to handle house chores, and she asked him him why he seemed so surprised by that. Quickly, our hero tried to correct himself, saying that wasn't exactly what he meant, but she pressed on, wanting to know what he really meant, and she repeated what he had said earlier, leaving him even more embarrassed. However, she soon reflected that, in a strange way, she should thank him for the whole situation. He, in turn, advised her to relax while she was there, asking if that wasn't why she had come to him. Hearing that, the girl sarcastically asked why he was lecturing her in her own house, and her natural tone caught him off guard, making him agree that it was a fair question. Then she said he could at least pretend to be a bit more thankful for her efforts. He immediately replied that he was grateful, but that she was trying too hard since the goal was for her to rest. But she simply said she didn't feel tired. His insistence made her frown. Confused by her reaction, he wondered why she was looking at him that way, and again asked her to just do fewer chores. Breaking the tension, she then said she wanted to ask him something, and he, curious, wanted to know what it was. Soon, the girl commented that if there was a guest helping with the chores, many people would probably complain later, saying the work hadn't been done properly. He, however, explained his point of view, stating that entrusting someone with a task meant accepting that it wouldn't be done your way, and that if someone couldn't accept that, they shouldn't delegate in the first place. His logic led her to a new suspicion, and she asked if he secretly didn't like her cooking. Yamamoto, however, immediately denied it, assuring her it was very good. He just clarified that he wanted her to take better care of herself, and that she didn't need to wait for him to eat. Hayashi, however, replied that if she ate earlier, she would just end up watching him eat afterward, and watching him eat would make her hungry again. And, well, that simple reason left him speechless. With a sigh, he said that although he didn't agree, he understood her point of view. Despite everything, she declared that she wouldn't slow down on the chores, and he, no longer understanding anything, asked her why. With disarming honesty, she simply answered that it was because she felt bored. He then remembered that her phone was broken and suggested she watch TV, but the girl replied that she found television boring. Suddenly, an idea seemed to pop into his head, and he asked her to wait a moment. Then, he got up and went to his shelf, looking for something. With a cloth in hand, he began carefully cleaning a tablet that had been stored away. He then offered the device to the girl, who looked at him completely surprised by the unexpected gesture. Our hero explained that it was an old tablet he no longer used, and she, still hesitant, asked if he was sure about that. Even so, he extended the device toward her. And, pointing at her, Yamamoto advised her not only to do chores, but also to make sure she had a bit of fun, too. And, well, his words made her smile, and she remarked that the situation was ironic, as people usually told others to work, not the other way around. At that moment, her face blushed, and a genuine smile formed on her lips. Her hands then held the tablet with a delicacy that contrasted with her usual attitude, and with a smile that mixed gratitude and a touch of teasing, she thanked him for the gift. Visibly embarrassed but trying to keep his composure, he just said it was okay. Next, he also handed her the charger. Excited, Hayashi said she would use the device as soon as she finished washing the dishes and told him to go watch TV or do something else. Sometime later, our hero couldn't take his eyes off how happy she had been. Lying on the bed, the girl called out to him, to which he promptly responded. Suddenly, she turned and said she would give the tablet back to him, but only for 10 minutes, which left him completely confused. Then, she threw herself back on the bed. Then, like a lightning bolt, a terrible realization hit him, and his eyes widened in sheer panic. Our hero realized he had forgotten to erase the device's history, which contained a vast collection of spicy images he had saved. Looking at her, a feeling of relief washed over him, and he said that since she had returned the tablet in time, he owed her one. Without wasting a second, he began frantically deleting the entire history, trying to eliminate every trace of his secret. Shortly after, she called his name again, and he, still nervous, responded. With a mischievous smile, she turned and remarked that deep down, he wasn't any different from the others, with the same desires as any boy. Her look clearly showed that she was enjoying his embarrassment. Completely red, he hid his face behind the tablet and asked her to stop teasing him. His reaction only made her laugh even harder, and she threw herself on the bed, laughing non-stop at the situation. Amid the laughter, she teased him, asking what his type of girl was, but he shouted that he would never tell her something like that. The next morning, marking their 4th day living together, Yamamoto was already up, opening the window to begin his cleaning routine. His focus for the day was the window track, and he scrubbed it vigorously with a brush, removing all the built-up dirt. With almost manic enthusiasm, he marveled at the amount of filth he found. His shout of excitement, however, was followed by immediate panic when he realized he might have made too too much noise. Heart-pounding, he slowly turned toward the bed, and there was Hayashi, beginning to stir, grumbling as she woke up from the noise. She then sat up in bed and, still sleepy, wished him good morning. Embarrassed, he also wished her good morning and apologized. She in turn asked what had happened because she had heard him yell. Nervously, he just said he was cleaning, and she, still drowsy, seemed to accept the answer without question. He tried to explain better, saying that the dirt was coming off with magical ease and that in the excitement of the moment, he had ended up yelling unintentionally. To his surprise, she said she completely understood, which left him stunned. And with a smile, she explained that it was normal to yell when excited about something. And, well, the way she repeated those words carried a clear innuendo. He picked up on the double meaning in her words, which sounded much more suggestive than they should have. The girl, meanwhile, just apologized for sleeping too much. While stretching, she confessed she had stayed up late, completely engrossed with the tablet he had given her. Later, during breakfast, he commented that it was great she had enjoyed herself so much that she lost track of time, and she eagerly agreed. Curious, he asked what kind of videos she had been watching, but she vaguely replied that they were just videos. Suddenly, she picked up the tablet and asked if he wanted to see, making him wonder if this was the same person who, days before, had said it was rude to watch things during meals. The video she was watching told the story of a couple who, to celebrate their anniversary, decided to go to a fancy restaurant. However, even following the dress code, they were turned away by a snobbish employee who judged them by their clothes, claiming they were too poor for the establishment. Disappointed, the couple went to their usual restaurant, where the chef, upon hearing the story, was outraged by what had happened. Turns out that chef used to be the head cook at the fancy place, and he declared that the employee's behavior was unforgivable. And well, the next scene showed the chef yelling at the manager about the poor training of his staff, who kept apologizing over and over. As a result, the rude employee was fired on the spot to his utter despair. Soon, the video ended with a happy and satisfying conclusion. After that, Hayashi stared at him with shining eyes, eagerly waiting for his reaction. She then asked if he hadn't thought it was good, and he, a bit awkward, just agreed. However, in his thoughts, he reflected that it wasn't like he hadn't liked it, but something about that story deeply bothered him. The truth was, he had never liked that kind of content. To him, using someone else's influence to punish someone seemed petty. He thought that, although there was nothing wrong with asking for help, what bothered him was that the protagonists of those stories never showed the will to make the villain pay on their own. In his opinion, those stories were lazy, since the characters just complained, waited for someone else to solve their problems, and took no responsibility. And looking at the tablet's history, he noticed with some apprehension that it was full of videos with the same theme. At that moment, Hayashi snapped him out of his thoughts, asking which part of the video he had liked the most. The question caught him off guard, and he, confused, asked her to clarify what she meant. Her eyes sparkled with wild anticipation. Completely embarrassed and sweating, he didn't know what to say. But she quickly broke the awkward tension by calling him. And with a sharp look, she said he hadn't liked the video. Caught red-handed, our hero tried to play it off, stammering that it wasn't that at all and that he had just thought the waiter in the story was dumb. He then nervously asked what she thought, and to his relief, she agreed, saying she totally understood that feeling. With that, the poor guy celebrated internally for getting away with it, changing the subject. He just told her to make sure to get enough sleep, as it wasn't good for her, and she agreed. Later on his way to college, he told her he didn't have work that day and said goodbye. While walking, he thought about her obsession with those videos, and a new theory emerged. Maybe deep down, Hayashi wanted to punish her ex-boyfriend. If that were the reason, he thought maybe he could convince her to go to the police again. However, he didn't want things to be resolved like in the videos. He wanted her to take the first step toward her own freedom. Already on the college campus, the worry hit him. After all, it had been that 4 days since she ran away, and he was sure her ex must be looking for her. Given the urgency, he decided the sooner he solved it, the better, and that he would have to ask Kasahara for help no matter what. He then took a deep breath, gathering all the courage he had for the difficult task ahead, and with renewed determination in his eyes, Yamamoto prepared to act. However, everything had gone wrong, because the next day, he felt like a complete idiot for hesitating and ruining it all. But that day, he was determined to talk to Kasahara one way or another. However, his search around campus proved useless, and he kept wondering where she could be. And frustratingly, the girl seemed to be nowhere, and so another day ended with no progress at all. On his way home, he regretted his lack of progress, remembering that he only saw her during French class. However, as he walked inside, disappointed with himself, something on the street caught his attention. As he approached the walkway that led to his building, a chill chill ran down his spine. He noticed that the lights in his apartment were off, which was unusual and left him uneasy. At that moment, a wave of dread took over him, and his face twisted in pure panic. The memory of Hayashi leaving the house the other day to go to the market invaded his mind. He recalled her saying she was going to prepare dinner so he could relax and forget his worries. Then, the worst-case scenario crossed his mind. What if her ex had seen her that day? With that, an image of a sinister shadow following her down a dark street formed in his imagination. The thought that her ex might have followed her and found out where they lived left him frozen in fear. Gripped by panic, he began running desperately toward his apartment, taking the stairs 2 at a time. While shouting her name, his cries echoed through the apartment as he tried to unlock the door as fast as possible. Heart pounding, he finally got inside. He paused at the entrance, breathless, trying to see something in the darkness of the room. Carefully, he took off his shoes and stepped further into the apartment. Until then, he found her there, peacefully lying on the bed with the tablet beside her face. With that, a sigh of relief escaped his lips when he realized she was just asleep. Next, her snoring made him think, with slight irritation, that this wasn't exactly the response he expected after calling her with so much concern. However, his anger quickly turned into a smile as he watched her sleep. His gaze then shifted to the clothes drying on the balcony, a sign that life, for now, was continuing peacefully. Deciding not to disturb her, he thought about leaving the tablet there for now, but a murmur from the bed indicated she was waking up. Suddenly, she sat up quickly, apologizing. In her haste to get up, she stepped wrong and lost her balance. In a quick move, he caught her to keep her from falling, holding her in his arms. Worried, he asked if she was okay. Annoyed, she pulled away and told him to shut up. He, in turn, said, "That's what happens when you get up too fast." Seeing her sitting, head down among the clothes, he said there was no need for such fuss. Still facing away, she apologized again. However, Hayashi felt bad about the situation, saying that the chores should be her responsibility. Distressed, she finally turned to him, regretting that she had neglected her duties. Our hero tried to reassure her, saying it was okay to mess up now and then, but she insisted that it wasn't right. The girl then lowered her head and remained in guilty silence, feeling like a burden. With that, Yamamoto didn't know how to handle the situation, but soon he asked why she hadn't done the chores, to which she admitted that it was because she had stayed up late and slept all day. He asked if she had spent the whole night on the tablet, and Hayashi confirmed. With that, our hero said the solution was simple. She just needed to stop staying up so late. He said that wasting time feeling guilty wouldn't get her anywhere, and that if there was a problem, she just had to fix it. Surprised, she asked if he wasn't mad, but he replied that there was no reason to get angry over house chores. Even with his words, the girl remained downcast. With that, a cold sweat ran down Yamamoto's face. Then, he offered to give her a little advice, and she, curious, asked what it was. With a serious and direct look, he said that no one died from making a mistake, and asked if anyone had died just because she didn't do the chores that day, stressing that this was the level of failure they were talking about. With that, he asked her to stop beating herself up over something so minor, and she just nodded. The girl then promised to stop staying up late, and he, satisfied, said the matter was settled. Blushing, she thanked him and commented that he was too mature, and teased him, saying his maturity was almost scary. Our hero, in turn, said her comment was rude and that he'd get mad. Laughing, Hayashi said she was just kidding, and that she'd go make dinner, to which he agreed. And so, their routine returned to normal. While cooking, Hayashi thought to herself that maybe this was what it felt like to live with someone you love. Hearing that, our hero asked what she had said, and she changed the subject, saying it was nothing. With a smile, she confessed that she had just been thinking that maybe she should have talked to him more back in high school. Yamamoto, in turn, said it was good that she was realizing that, and clarified that with her regret. Then they both felt the same. His confession made her smile genuinely and warmly. During dinner, she wondered if high school would have been better if they had talked more. He agreed, but said it wasn't like him to dwell on regrets. And with that, the two returned to the core of the day, understanding that a mistake didn't mean everything was lost. Yamamoto reflected that they weren't separated forever, and that they still had time to start again. Breaking the mood, she asked if he wanted something specific for the next day's meal, but he just replied that he'd eat whatever she made. His answer made her indignant, and she shouted that whatever was the worst possible answer anyone could give. She then asked if his mom had never taught him that, which caught him off guard. Embarrassed, he asked her to never say that to anyone else besides him, and she finally agreed. Soon, she went back to eating. While eating, our hero remembered that his mom might have said something similar, but in her case, he claimed it was true. After all, everything she cooked was genuinely good. The next day, marking the 5th day since Hayashi had been hiding in his apartment, he went to college. Even amid the noise of the university cafeteria, his thoughts were on her. He reflected on how much she had changed in such a short time since she arrived. And with that realization, he felt she might be ready to listen, and he thought that if he could convince her to report her ex, everyone would be safer. Next, our hero looked for a place to sit. He looked around, frustrated, realizing there were no empty seats. To make things worse, he noticed many people were using extra chairs to hold their bags, and the idea of asking to sit felt annoying. Suddenly, a voice called him, and he turned around surprised as he felt a tap on his shoulder. It was none other than Kasahara, who, with a smile, asked if he was looking for a seat. Completely shocked to find her at that exact moment, he could only stammer her name. Kindly, she said there was an empty seat next to her. Before he could react, she guided him to her table and placed his tray on it. Awkwardly, he tried to decline, saying she didn't need to worry and that a seat would be available soon. The girl, however, insisted with a smile, saying they should help each other when in trouble. Overcome by her kindness, he finally gave in and agreed to sit down. Already seated, he awkwardly commented that it had been a long time since they last saw each other, to which she agreed. Then, with a teasing look, she called him by name and asked if he had been avoiding her. The question caught him off guard, and a drop of sweat rolled down his face, revealing his nervousness. He tried to justify himself, saying he just didn't have a reason to talk to her. Kasahara, in turn, asked if he only talked to people out of obligation. He admitted it, and she commented that it really suited his style. Soon, a brief and awkward silence hung between them. Trying to turn the tables, he asked why she hadn't talked to him before, and with a sly smile, she replied that she was doing exactly that now. With no way to win that argument, he said that was a fair point. Wrapping up the topic, he thanked her for the seat, to which she said it was no problem. With a kind smile, she said that if she could help him in any way, that would already be enough for her. The way she said it made him flustered, and he mentally begged her to stop saying things with double meanings. Breaking the tension, our hero directly asked what she wanted, catching her off guard. He pressed on, telling her not to play dumb, saying it was obvious she had something to tell him. Then her gaze turned dark, and she remained silent for a moment, unsure of how to start. With that, Kasahara asked if he remembered Hayashi Megumi, and, well, the mention of her made his eyes widen, surprised that she had brought it up first. She then recalled how the two were annoyingly close in high school, always bickering. He, with a forced smile, agreed it was a fair description. Kasahara then asked if he knew that Hayashi had also moved to Tokyo, to which he confirmed. And with a serious look, she finally asked the crucial question, wanting to know if he had seen her recently. With that, thousands of questions raced through his mind. He wondered why Kasahara was asking him that and if she was also looking for Hayashi. His mind worked quickly, pondering whether Hayashi's ex-boyfriend had asked Kasahara to look for her, and if so, how the two even knew each other. Soon, the worst-case scenario formed in his mind, the idea that maybe Kasahara had introduced them, and if that were true, he knew he couldn't speak carelessly about Hayashi. The girl, noticing his hesitation, called out to him, pulling him out of his thoughts. Then, his attention was drawn to a girl approaching the table. As she asked Kasahara if she knew him, then the girl named Irie complained about how crowded the cafeteria was at that hour. Kasahara introduced Yamamoto to her friend, and, to his surprise, introduced him as her boyfriend. Hearing that, he only commented that she had a weird sense of humor. Irie then recognized him, saying she remembered seeing him in French class. She identified him as the guy who always aced the exams, and he, embarrassed, confirmed it. Excited, the girl clung to his arm, praised him, and asked him to tutor her. She squeezed his arm tightly, making him even more uncomfortable with the sudden closeness. Panicking, he thought about how incredibly forward and persistent she was. Kasahara, however, told Irie that it wouldn't work, and explained with a smile that Yamamoto had another class in the third period. And, well, that information shocked him, making him wonder how she knew his schedule. Irie, disappointed, just lamented the lost opportunity. Suddenly, the girl's attention was drawn to the bento box on the table. Surprised by what she saw, she asked if, besides being smart, he also knew how to cook. Kasahara also complimented the meal, saying it looked very homemade, and Yamamoto, flustered, just nodded. While eating, he remained silent, and in his thoughts, he regretted that the day would be another dead end. As he couldn't say that Hayashi had prepared the meal, not until he was sure Kasahara wasn't a threat. Suddenly, an obvious idea hit him, and he wondered why he simply didn't ask Hayashi directly how she met her ex, and whether Kasahara was involved. With that in mind, he returned home shortly after and announced his arrival. From the kitchen, Hayashi welcomed him back with a radiant smile. However, her expression subtly changed when she noticed his nervousness. Our hero stood at the entrance, hesitant, and called her name. With sharp intuition, she pointed at him and asked if he had met a girl that day, which left him completely shocked. He tried to deny it, but then remembered meeting Kasahara and her friends. In his thoughts, he wondered how she knew, and then realized she might have smelled Irie's perfume on his clothes. Jealous, Hayashi claimed she was right. Trying to sound indifferent, he confirmed he had met a girl and asked what the problem was. With clenched fists, she exploded, yelling and demanding to know why he would meet another girl. And well, that reaction left him completely baffled. Irritated, he shot back, asking why she acted like he had done something wrong. They weren't dating after all. Those words hit her hard, and she lowered her head, agreeing softly. Then she began her speech, saying she was just just a stranger to him and had no right to care about who he met. Hayashi claimed she was sure any girl he chose would be better than her in every way. Confused, he asked what the hell she was talking about. Facing away from him, she asked if he didn't find the whole situation strange, and agreed with what he had said earlier, that they weren't a couple. And in desperation, she asked why she was living there, saying none of it made sense. She listed what she did, like cooking for him and living in his house, even though they had no relationship. Hearing that, he thought, frustrated, that she was distorting everything again. He tried to approach, asking her to listen to him, but with tears in her eyes, she turned and screamed for him not to touch her. Before he could say anything, she ran out of the apartment and he shouted her name in desperation. The girl ran down the stairs, fleeing without direction. Standing in the doorway, Yamamoto was completely in shock, unable to believe what had just happened. Shortly after, he ran into the street, yelling her name, trying to find her. Meanwhile, the girl ran out of breath. Gradually, her legs gave out and she stopped, panting in the middle of the sidewalk. Exhausted, she began to walk slowly down the street with nowhere to go. Tears mixed with the sweat on her face. Soon, anguish took over her. She then stopped completely, standing in the middle of the deserted street, staring into nothing. And in her thoughts, she asked herself what the hell she was doing. Looking down at her feet, she wondered why she had acted so impulsively. At that moment, her fists clenched tightly, and she remembered how the citrus scent on him had irritated her deeply, making her explode with anger and hate everything in that moment. Now, regretful, she only groaned in frustration, covering her face with her hands. Several memories of him appeared in her mind, like when he welcomed her kindly, praised her cooking, or tried to comfort her, always being the one who reached out when she needed it most. And still, she had treated him that way. Wandering aimlessly, she wondered what she would do now. In her thoughts, she called herself an idiot, remembering how Yamamoto had always been so kind to her. She imagined he was probably angry, or maybe even relieved that she was finally gone. With that, the question of what to do stayed in her mind. In the end, her greatest fear was just one. She didn't want Yamamoto to hate her. At that moment, despair consumed her, and she said she didn't know what to do anymore. Crouched on the sidewalk, overcome by a feeling of helplessness, she silently wished Yamamoto were there. Suddenly, someone walked toward her. Meanwhile, a tear ran down her cheek. However, her whole body soon shrank in terror as she recognized the figure. It was him, her ex-boyfriend, who called her by her first name. With that, pure terror appeared on her face. Her arms trembled uncontrollably, revealing the fear she felt. With a trembling voice, she could only whisper his name, Seiji. With a cold, calculated smile, he asked where she had been all this time. His presence terrified her, and sweat ran down her face. Her mind then took her back to the day she met him, shortly after starting college, at a group date arranged by a friend, where all the guys were bankers and the girls dreamed of marrying rich men. She remembered how she didn't care for that kind of event, but since she had just moved to Tokyo, she felt the need to make friends. Her friend said she could sit wherever she wanted later, but Hayashi replied indifferently. Then she suggested everyone introduce themselves. And that's how a guy with a gentle smile introduced himself as Seiji Utsumi. Hayashi just watched him silently. Her first impression of him was of a calm, polite man, the type who seemed completely harmless. That made her think how those bankers must live in a world totally different from hers. After all, at that time, she was broke and hopping from one part-time job to another, since her father had refused to give her any help beyond tuition. That independence was all she wanted, as she hated her controlling father. Leaving home was worth any cost. However, the freedom in Tokyo brought a new problem: lack of money. Many times her dinner was just cheap bread. Because of all those struggles, dating Seiji felt new and refreshing. Shortly after, he took her out, and for the first time in a long while, she felt cared for and happy. The peak of that fairy tale was when he asked her to move in with him. She admitted to herself that people could call her opportunistic, and she couldn't deny it. Maybe that's why in the end things turned out so badly, because over time his kindness vanished, replaced by cruel remarks about her cooking and her taste. He accused her of being lazy and not trying hard enough, and after hitting her, he'd come with fake apologies, promising he wouldn't do it again. And, well, that was the sad reality Hayashi lived in. Seiji rudely complimented her, saying she had improved in cooking, but that in the beginning her food had been nearly inedible. Every morning she saw him leave for work, wishing him a good day like a devoted wife. And as soon as the door closed, she stayed alone, silently waiting for his return. The day passed slowly, and when night came, fear consumed her. She curled up in a corner, terrified at the thought that he could return home at any moment. On one of those nights, she finally decided she couldn't take it anymore, but despair hit her when she realized she had nowhere to go. Her feet, however, took her to a familiar place, the convenience store. And it was there, standing in front of the shop, that fate led her to reunite with Yamamoto. In that desperate moment, she had re-encountered a man who was the complete opposite of everything she knew. Soon, the memory faded, and she returned to the terrifying reality. Seiji, her ex, stood in front of her, asking again where she had been for the past 5 days. His gaze darkened, and the patience in his voice vanished. Then, a sound of pure contempt escaped her lips as she instinctively stepped back. He tried to grab her hand, saying everything was fine now that he had found her. With forced care, he claimed he had been worried about her. With her head down, she only apologized. But his touch made her shudder in disgust and fear. He then told her to come home, to which she reacted with extreme apprehension. Seeing her expression, he asked why she was acting like that, cruelly claiming she had no place to go but his apartment. The word home echoed in her mind like a nightmare. The mere idea of returning to that place made her cry in despair. The image of him calling her back haunted her. Her heart screamed that she couldn't go back, but reason told her she had nowhere else to turn. Feeling she had nothing left and no value, she thought she had no choice but to give in. But then, a memory of Yamamoto's voice came, explaining his peculiar reason for taking her in. That thought brought a new light into her darkness, and a spark of hope ignited. She remembered him saying he'd eat anything she made. Simple gestures, but ones that made her feel like he valued someone like her. The strongest memory, however, was his gentle voice from the floor of the room, saying she had done well. In that moment, through tears, all she wanted was to go back to Yamamoto, but doubt quickly consumed her. She thought he probably wouldn't help her again, not after she had rejected his help and run away. And she wondered what Yamamoto would say if he saw her in such a pathetic state, concluding that he'd probably ask the most important question: what do you want to do? The memory of that question brought her to tears. She finally knew what she really wanted. With that in mind, an unexpected laugh escaped her lips. Seiji, confused by the sudden change in attitude, asked what was wrong with her. Hayashi called him by name, with a calm he didn't expect. And then, with a face full of fury and determination, she declared that she wasn't going back with him. Her declaration left him completely stunned. She continued, telling him to get out of her sight and saying she wouldn't involve the police. Confused, he asked her to wait, saying he didn't understand the situation. She then confronted him, asking if he had any idea how much she had suffered because of him. With angry tears, she screamed, incredulous that he truly didn't understand the pain he had caused. His attitude shifted, and he tried a fake apology, saying he was sorry if he had hurt her. She asked what exactly he was apologizing for. Seiji, in turn, tried to justify himself, saying he sometimes got frustrated and ended up hitting her. Outraged, she confronted him, asking how he could treat constant abuse as if it were something occasional, while he tried to shift the blame onto her. And well, that accusation genuinely confused her. He then complained that she never listened to what he said, which justified his anger. She retorted, saying it was all his fault, that she had dropped out of college to become the housewife he demanded, and that she had done her best to meet his expectations. He, however, belittled her, asking what more she wanted from him, since she had never contributed a cent to their expenses. Coldly, he continued, saying her cooking was terrible and that every night with her was agony. With a smug smile, he asked if she still wasn't coming back, claiming he had plenty of replacements, but she had no one but him. He cruelly listed her flaws, saying she had no money, no home, no degree, and was hysterical and aggressive on top of it all. With contempt, he claimed to be the only one who would tolerate her and asked if she finally understood. His words, however, had the opposite effect, and she wondered how she could have given herself to a man like that. But he quickly grabbed her arm, trying to drag her away, while she thought, shocked, if she was really that disposable to him. His hand gripped her wrist tightly, but at that moment she was no longer the same. And with strength she didn't know she had, she fought back, screaming that she wouldn't go with him. Her cries for help echoed through the street. Seiji dragged her forcefully, but she resisted with everything she had, and in an act of pure desperation, she screamed for help, calling Yamamoto's name. Suddenly, a hand grabbed Seiji's wrist, and someone shouted for him to leave her alone. It was Yamamoto, who had arrived just in time, standing between them and shielding her. Furious, he told Seiji that it was clear she didn't want to go with him. Hearing his voice, tears of relief streamed down Hayashi's face as she whispered his name. And so, the three stood in the middle of the street in a tense standoff. Hayashi's heart raced as she realized Yamamoto, panting and drenched in sweat, had run all that way just to save her. And with tears in her eyes, she realized he had been searching for her the entire time. Seiji, irritated, asked what the hell was going on. But our hero confronted him, asking if he thought he'd ignore a crime after seeing him drag the girl by force. Trying to smooth things over, Seiji apologized for the misunderstanding, claiming the two were a couple. Little did that fool know who Yamamoto Yamamoto really was, who looked at him with suspicion, questioning the truth of that claim. Our protagonist pointed out that she didn't look happy to see him. Even so, Seiji tried to justify it, saying it was just an awkward moment, and that she sometimes got hysterical. Hearing that, Hayashi lowered her head. Yamamoto wasn't fooled and said that even if they were a couple, he had said some very concerning things, and asked if this really was just a lover's quarrel, to which Seiji apologized again, claiming he couldn't take it anymore. But Yamamoto stated that it didn't sound like a simple argument, since he had heard disturbing things, like mentions of abuse and worse. Irritated, Seiji asked why he didn't mind his own business. He tried to justify himself, shouting that they were the only ones arguing in public, and that Hayashi was just having one of her episodes, but that he still loved her. Yamamoto then turned to Hayashi and asked if that was true, but she looked nervous and couldn't respond. In her thoughts, she concluded Yamamoto was just bluffing. After all, there was no way he'd believe such a weak excuse from Seiji. Seiji, thinking he had won, said it was good that he finally understood he shouldn't interfere. However, Yamamoto just sighed, and with a serious face said they were going to the police station. The suggestion left Seiji completely shocked. Desperate, the fool asked why they'd need to do something like that, to which Yamamoto calmly reminded him that he himself had said outsiders shouldn't get involved. Our hero said that since he had his side of the story, the police could sort it out fairly. But Seiji, stammering, said there was no need to go that far. Yamamoto argued that the two were yelling in a quiet neighborhood, and that this was exactly the kind of situation that warranted a call to the police. That's when Hayashi noticed that the shouting had drawn the neighbors' attention, who were now watching from the street. Seiji tried to downplay the situation, saying it wasn't serious, which made Yamamoto even more irritated. Our hero confronted him, listing his contradictions and asking if he really wanted to solve the problem, saying the police were the best path. He then pressed him, asking if there was any reason why he couldn't go to the station. Cornered, Seiji nervously denied it. Soon, our protagonist pointed to Hayashi's arms, noting they were covered in bruises. Whispers started, and Hayashi, embarrassed, looked away. The crowd concluded it was domestic violence and that they should call the police. Realizing this, Seiji panicked and shouted that she had just fallen. With unsettling calm, Yamamoto asked if her legs had also tripped. Seiji insisted that that's all it was, but our hero noted that the bruises seemed to be from different dates, and pressed him, asking why, if she fell so often, he didn't help her. With no way to respond, Seiji snapped, asking what his problem was. He shouted that the two were a couple, that they loved each other, and that no one had any business interfering. However, that only made our protagonist even more furious. He then asked where Seiji had been while she was missing. Seiji, in turn, said he had been looking for her. Yamamoto then asked the fatal question, if he had been looking for her, why hadn't he filed a missing person report? Cornered, Seiji shouted that he couldn't because he was too busy. The flimsy excuse made Yamamoto explode, and he shouted, asking what could be more important than her safety, accusing him of blaming her instead of supporting her. Our hero shouted that this wasn't love, but a childish power game so Seiji could feel superior. Meanwhile, Hayashi looked at Yamamoto's back, clearly realizing he was doing all of this for her. She could hardly believe he was so angry for someone like her. With that, her eyes filled with tears. Not of fear this time, but of an emotion she could barely understand. Yamamoto's words left Seiji completely speechless, shocked by the accusation. The shouting attracted even more neighbors, who now formed a small crowd in the street. Finding himself surrounded and exposed, Seiji apologized. He tried to justify himself, saying he sometimes just lost control and couldn't help it. Then he bowed in a formal apology in front of everyone, and there he remained, head bowed, humiliated. Hayashi remained indifferent in front of him. In her thoughts, she acknowledged the apology but knew deep down that Seiji would do it all again. He raised his head with a hopeful smile, asking if that meant she forgave him. However, with a coldness he had never seen before, she said she wouldn't go back. Desperate, he said he couldn't live without her, but she told him to stop saying things he didn't mean. He insisted that he didn't want anyone else but her, but Hayashi told him to stop the act. With his face twisted in desperation, he begged her to come home. But the old Hayashi no longer existed, and in an unexpected move, she grabbed him by the collar, which left him completely shocked. Her hand gripped his shirt with surprising strength, showing that she had finally taken control of the situation. Her gaze was empty and cold. For the first time, she was looking down at him. Seiji, intimidated, started to stammer, not knowing what to say. Hayashi finally understood why he had never reported her missing, and realized that deep down, he had already found someone to replace her. He desperately tried to deny it, saying it wasn't like that. Yamamoto, from a distance, just watched silently. Looking at her own bruises, Hayashi said she now understood that his concern had always been a lie. Desperate, he reached out, calling for her. but in a symbolic moment, the queen he had created wished he would die. The next day, Yamamoto woke up on his futon, somewhat out of breath. Unlike other days, Hayashi hadn't slept with him. The apartment felt strangely quiet and empty that morning. He tried to follow his routine, cleaning the floor, but his usual energy wasn't there. Looking around, he wondered if the room had always felt so spacious. Our hero realized he had gotten too used to living with her. He ate alone in front of the television, but the sound couldn't fill the silence. Every little detail of the apartment highlighted her absence. With his face resting on his hand, he got lost in thought, bored and lonely. The only thing on his mind was the moment she would finally come back. Not even at college could he concentrate, and the professor's voice was a distant buzz. After all, his thoughts were elsewhere. The only thing he wanted was for her to simply come back home. Time passed slowly, and the clock was nearing noon when he heard the sound of the door opening. Relieved, he said she had taken a while, to which she just agreed as she closed the door, still with her head down. Her expression was pure sadness. Seeing her state, he approached, worried, asking if something had happened again. He then remembered the night before when the police arrived to break up the fight and took her to the station. He recalled how her ex had fled upon hearing the sirens and how the officers sent him home, even though he wanted to go with her. He admitted he had no idea what had happened afterward, but for now he just asked her to come in. Once inside the apartment, she asked if he was okay with all of it, which left him a bit confused. Then she just turned her back to him, hugging herself in a gesture of discomfort. Seeing her condition, he suggested she take a bath. It might help clear her mind. With a slight nod, she seemed to agree with the suggestion. He then watched her walk toward the bathroom. In his thoughts, he concluded that she probably didn't want to talk about it, and there was no point in pushing her. Deciding to give her space, he thought he'd prepare something to eat while she bathed. While cooking, his gaze kept drifting toward the bathroom door, still worried. A little later, 2 plates of fried rice were served on the table, and just as he heard the bathroom door open, he said her timing was perfect. The meal was almost ready. However, when he turned around, he was met with Hayashi stepping out of the bathroom, wearing only a towel. The sight completely caught him off guard, and his face turned bright red. Not knowing how to react, he could only stammer her name. Trying to break the tension, he asked if she forgot to take her clothes, calling her clumsy. Ignoring his comment, she suddenly let the towel drop. In a panic, he covered his face with his hands, shouting and calling her an idiot. She then asked if he remembered what she had told him before. Still not looking, the poor guy only asked her to get dressed and asked what she was doing. Hayashi said he had saved her and done something for her that she could never repay. With teary eyes, she then asked him to look, saying he had the right to do whatever he wanted with her body and that it was her duty to obey him. The girl insisted, saying she would do anything he asked. With a trembling voice, she said she felt like she had to do it. She tried to explain her twisted logic, saying her ex always criticized her cooking but praised her body, and that was the only thing she trusted. Faced with her offer, he interrupted her, refusing without hesitation, and asked if she was stupid. Furious, he asked if she was trying to turn him into the same scum her ex was. He grabbed her by the shoulders and confronted her, trying to understand if that was what she expected from him, someone who would dominate, control, and hurt her endlessly. With that, he shouted that if he did that, he would lose the right to despise her ex. Our hero then handed her clothes and told her to get dressed. Hayashi, confused, questioned his logic, but he just said it wasn't logic. It was simply how things should be. Still confused, she asked what that was supposed to mean. With that, he started yelling, reaffirming his position. His words finally reached her and she broke down in tears, asking why he was always so kind to her. And as she cried, she felt like those tears were washing away the weight that suffocated her, slowly freeing her from the curse that had bound her. Yamamoto, unsure how to react to such an emotional outburst, just watched in silence, realizing that for the first time, she was truly crying. Between sobs, she held a towel against her body and kept apologizing. Yamamoto, however, tried to calm her, saying it was okay and that, for now, she should just go get dressed, to which the girl agreed. Suddenly, a sneeze broke the silence, and embarrassed, Hayashi rushed into the room to finally get dressed. Thus, Yamamoto let out a long sigh, processing everything that had just happened. His gaze then turned to the 2 plates on the table, and he lamented that the food was already completely cold. With the frying pan in hand, he wondered if he should reheat it. However, the sound of the bedroom door opening caught his attention. Now dressed, Hayashi came out of the room and called him. Still with his back turned, he asked what she wanted. Hayashi, doubting she was welcome in that house after everything that happened, asked if he was okay with her staying there. But ignoring her question, Yamamoto simply asked what she really wanted. At that moment, she exploded, yelling that it was his room, so he shouldn't ask her what she wanted. And she stated that the decision about her staying or not should be entirely his. So the girl stood still, fists clenched, waiting for an answer. However, our hero said he had already given her his answer a long time ago, and explained that he was her ally, and therefore letting her stay or lending her money wasn't a big deal, saying he thought he had already made that clear. With that, he asked her again if she wanted to stay there or not. However, she still couldn't understand him. After all, she reminded him that because of her ex-boyfriend had seen his face. The girl feared that next time he might go after him instead of her. Still, even with that risk, she didn't understand why he kept being willing to hide her. With teary eyes, Hayashi asked why he would go so far for someone like her. Hearing that, our hero looked a bit pensive, but then he said the reason was simple, because helping her was something he could do, and that whenever it was within his reach, he would lend a hand in practically any situation. His response left her speechless. However, he quickly corrected himself, saying that wasn't the only reason, and with a smile, he confessed that he wanted to eat her hamburger steak again. In tears, the poor girl asked if, by cooking the hamburger steak, he would really do anything, and without hesitation, Yamamoto confirmed. Faced with that, her expression changed, and she announced that she had 2 requests to make. Curious, he asked what they were. The girl then looked away, seeming to gather courage to speak, and then she lifted her face. And so she made her first request. She wanted him to let her stay there again. Our hero agreed immediately. Hayashi then mentioned there was another one, and with a firm look, she finally declared that she wanted to report it to the police. And, well, her declaration completely caught him off guard. She confessed that she knew she probably should do it alone, but said she was scared. The poor thing feared she might back out at the last second and said she didn't want to lose anything else. And so she bowed in a gesture of plea and asked him to go with her to the police station. Still with her head lowered, she begged for his help. Then, Hayashi lifted her face and looked at him in a way he had never seen before. At that moment, our hero realized things were finally heading in a good direction. After all, now she wanted to change, taking that step on her own. So he felt relieved. And faced with that, he finally agreed to help her. With a genuine smile, Hayashi thanked him. The next day, already at his part-time job, our hero kept yawning non-stop. He felt exhausted and thought about how hectic that day had been. Still, he felt calm because, thanks to all that, he had one less worry on his mind. After all, that same afternoon, they had gone to the police station and finally filed the report. He remembered how, the night before, when the police arrived, Seiji had already disappeared, and that after they sent him home, Hayashi apparently went with the police to her ex's apartment, but the place was completely empty. With that, our hero wondered where the hell he had gone, and wondered how long it would take for Hayashi to finally feel safe. Suddenly, something on the security camera caught his attention, and he wondered if a customer had arrived, and upon looking more closely, his eyes widened. Because it was Hayashi, who entered the store smiling and said she had finally found him. Surprised, he asked what she was doing out so late at night. She then showed him a tube of toothpaste, explaining that theirs had run out, and he scolded her, saying she could have let him know, but the girl reminded him that she didn't have a phone or even his number. While scanning the product, he commented that maybe it was time for her to get a new phone, but Hayashi said it was fine, as she didn't have anyone that important to call. She clarified that her friends weren't exactly the most reliable bunch, and well, that made him a bit pensive. Still, he said it might be a bit inconvenient not being able to contact her, to which she just agreed. However, he warned her that more importantly, she shouldn't be out so late since they didn't know where her ex was, but the girl simply said it was fine, which made him call her too optimistic. Changing the subject, she commented on how the place didn't get customers, and he said that hour was always dead. Then, with a smile, she offered to keep him company if he was bored, but he advised her to go home and sleep, as staying up would be bad for her skin. Then she tried to pay, saying she could at least buy her own toothpaste. Yamamoto, however, stopped her, telling her not to worry since he used it too. Faced with that, she said she would accept the offer, and with that, a brief silence fell between the two. He then asked if she wasn't going home, but Hayashi, still standing in front of him, reminded him that she had said she would keep him company. And well, that caught him off guard, and he wondered when that had been decided. Breaking the mood, she asked how long he had worked there. Hearing that, our hero asked what was with that sudden interrogation, but she just insisted he answer. Embarrassed, he replied that he had been working there for about 3 months. She then continued with the questions, wanting to know how often he visited his parents. Then she asked if he was in any club, had other part-time jobs, or did volunteer work, but he said no to all. She wanted to know about his hobbies and special skills, and to both, his answer was the same: cleaning. Surprised, she called him a complete maniac, and he, in turn, asked if that was supposed to be a compliment. But instead of answering, she just stared at him intensely, which left him completely confused. She then reminded him of what she had said earlier about how she wished she had talked more with him during high school. She lamented, saying that maybe things would have been different if she had spoken to him more. Our hero, however, tried to end the topic, saying there was no point in thinking about it now, as it was just a what if. Hayashi, however, disagreed and said there were things you only realized after regret and reflection, and with that, she finally declared that she wanted to know more about him. And with a blushing face, she waited for a response. Her declaration caught him by surprise, and he was visibly embarrassed by the situation. Yamamoto tried to downplay himself, saying he wasn't that interesting, especially for someone like her, but the girl winked at him and teased him not to be so full of himself about that. After all, she was the one who brought it up. With that, our hero finally gave in, but said he would prove that her curiosity was completely unfounded. Satisfied with his answer, she was genuinely happy. Then she turned the tables and asked if he didn't also want to know more about her. For example, she wanted to know what it had been like for him to live with her, and without hesitation, he said that, to begin with, it had been a headache. He then listed how she got annoyed at everything, didn't listen to him, and simply ran away when he tried to hide her. However, with a slightly blushing face, he admitted that, in the end, it hadn't been that bad. And she said he was terrible at saying nice things. He then agreed, wondering why there was still a weirdo who wanted to know more about him, and she, in turn, said he was really a lost cause. However, with a sarcastic smile, our hero said that actually, she was the one who needed help. So, a silence settled between the two again. Soon after, she called him, and he, curious, wanted to know what she wanted this time. And with a smile, the girl asked what he wanted for dinner. He, however, gave the worst possible answer, saying that if she was the one cooking, anything would be fine, which left her completely irritated. He then reflected that he never thought he would feel that way about Hayashi, and that if his high school self heard that, he would probably laugh. Soon he concluded that living with the arrogant girl from school wasn't as bad as he had expected. And so, as the former queen finally woke up and stretched, the sunlight hit the windows of that house full force, and our hero, in turn, was already scrubbing the tracks with his brush. His attention then turned to the bathroom faucet, and he thought about how dirt always built up around its base. And satisfied, he celebrated that the dirt was finally coming off. However, he was soon startled, because he heard Hayashi's voice calling him to the living room. Upon leaving, he found her standing and somewhat furious. Confused, he peeked through the door as she pointed out that 3 hours had already passed. With that, he realized he had gone into the bathroom at 10 in the morning, and it was already 1 in the afternoon. She then asked if he understood why she was angry, and he simply confirmed. At that moment, he asked why she was so mad, to which she yelled, denying it. Hayashi then pointed to the food on the table and complained that their lunch had gone cold because of him. She reminded him that she had called him at noon and asked what he had replied. Embarrassed, he remembered saying he was on his way. However, she confronted him, saying that it had been an hour since she had called him. And so it finally sank in, and he realized he had left Hayashi waiting for far too long. Our hero then put himself in her shoes and wondered how he would feel if he had to wait an hour for lunch. And, well, the conclusion was obvious. He would be furious. With that, he finally understood the reason for her anger. Then she announced a new rule. From that day on, cleaning would be limited to 1 hour per day. Shocked, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. But she explained that even though she understood it was his hobby, the obsession wasn't healthy. Hayashi warned him that if he cleaned for more than an hour the next day, she would get mad. And even with his protests, she just told him to stop acting like a child. Desperate, Yamamoto tried to negotiate, asking if it could at least be 2 hours. Hearing that, Hayashi called him by name and pressed him, wanting to know how many hours a day he would spend cleaning. And, well, the question made him break into a cold sweat. So he finally gave in and answered that it would be just 1 hour, to which she, with a smug smile, praised him. With the matter settled, she clasped her hands and said it was time to eat. And so the two thanked for the meal and began scarfing down the food. While eating, he felt frustrated with the new rule, hardly believing he now had only 1 hour a day for cleaning. However, he soon admitted to himself that, honestly, living with her wasn't that bad. Even so, he concluded that he'd never tell her that. It would be way too embarrassing. A while later, while he stayed at the table, Hayashi was already lying on the bed, watching something on the tablet. Suddenly, the sound from the device irritated him, and he wondered what was wrong with the character in the video. He then realized it was another one of those instant justice clips and concluded she was truly obsessed with them. He reflected that at first he thought she liked those videos because she identified with the situations, but now he saw she simply loved good Varrick's evil stories. Meanwhile, the girl burst out laughing. Watching her reaction, he couldn't help but think that, from the outside, laughing at others' punishment made her seem a little evil. However, by accident, the tablet slipped from her hands and landed straight on her face, which made him think that was instant karma. Immediately, she covered her face with her hands, and her legs began flailing uncontrollably, and that left him a bit worried. In the middle of her spasms, her shirt started riding up and fully exposed her stomach. The sight caught him off guard, and in a panic, he looked away, repeating to himself that he shouldn't look. In his thoughts, he reminded himself that even if they lived under the same roof, that kind of play was out of the question. With his eyes shut, he tried to stay focused and calm himself at all costs. And when he looked at her again, he was impressed by what the former queen of high school had become. He then imagined that the guys who used to fight with her in the past would probably love to see her like that and concluded that he was one of them. Trying to ignore his thoughts, he asked if she wanted an ice pack. Still writhing, she said she was fine, but he in turn thought she didn't look fine at all. He then teased her, saying she was a bit clumsy, to which she, irritated, told him to shut up. The next day, the two were already at a cell phone store. Hayashi commented that she wanted the same model she used before, but it seemed like it wasn't sold anymore. He then agreed, saying that if it was the same one from high school, it had probably been discontinued. And, well, that day, they had gone to buy a phone for Hayashi, since not being able to contact friends or family was too inconvenient. She then chose a model, and Yamamoto was ready to pay, but the girl stopped him, saying he didn't have to do that. And with a smile, she said she would buy the phone herself, as she still had some money left from her old part-time jobs. Knowing that, our hero simply agreed. Shortly after, they were already signing the contract, and as they left the store, Hayashi celebrated her new purchase with excitement, and with a radiant smile, she thanked him. He, however, said he hadn't done anything that deserved thanks, but the girl said the fact that he went with her was more than enough. Suddenly, she called him and commented that he seemed a little weird, but Yamamoto defended himself, saying it wasn't his fault. He didn't know where her ex was. He explained that if the ex saw him with her, he who had pretended to be just a bystander would definitely get the wrong idea. However, she reassured him, saying she was sure everything would be fine, and that if anything happened, she would scream at the top of her lungs. Back at the apartment, they were getting ready to set up the new phone. Yamamoto explained that the operating system was different from what she was used to, so it might seem a little weird at first. He then explained what an operating system was, but seeing her confused expression, he realized she definitely didn't understand a thing. She admitted she was terrible with technology. Surprised, he asked how that was possible since she had used the tablet without any issues. She then explained that a friend had taught her which buttons to press, and that she remembered everything by the shape of the apps, which shocked him. Internally, he said that even old folks understood what apps were, and concluded she was even more of a lost cause than he thought. Hayashi then asked him to teach her how to connect to the internet, and upon hearing that, he sighed. She then asked the most important question: how could she recover her friend's contacts? He explained that if she knew her account info, she could restore everything using the cloud backup. But completely confused, she asked why he was suddenly talking about clouds, which made him think she was dumber than he expected. Annoyed, she warned him that she'd get mad if he was mocking her, and he, in turn, noticed how quickly she switched between being useless and the feared queen. Trying to smooth things over, he asked what she had done the last time she changed phones. She then revealed that she had asked Akari to do it, which shocked him. She let someone else handle something so personal. Next, he wanted to know about her passwords, and Hayashi said Akari knew them all, which made him question if she even understood the point of passwords. While sipping something, he thought that he knew the two were close, but that was just too much. Internally, he concluded the whole situation was rather disturbing. He then asked if she at least remembered her account password, and she, without hesitation, said no. Despite everything, he handed her the phone, saying the setup was complete. She then thanked him and asked about her contacts, but he just said there was nothing more he could do. With that, our hero covered his mouth and looked rather pensive. He then said he wanted to ask her something, which surprised her. Then he asked how she and her ex had met. Hearing that, her eyes immediately widened. She then asked why she had to talk about that, but he just insisted. With that, the girl looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the topic. However, she finally gave in and explained that a college friend had invited her to a group date with elite bankers, and that's where she met him. He then asked if none of her high school or older friends were connected to him, and she confirmed they weren't. And, well, hearing that, a relieved smile formed on his lips. His reaction, however, left her completely confused. Yamamoto then asked for her phone for a second, and when he got it, she asked what he was doing. He explained that he was entering the contact info of her friends that he remembered. As he typed on the device, she just watched. He then suggested she ask them for help to recover the rest, and with that, it finally clicked for her. However, her expression changed, and she seemed a bit uncomfortable with the idea. He then asked if she didn't like it, but the girl said it depended on who it was. She explained she didn't want to have to tell people she wasn't close with that her boyfriend had broken her phone, and that's why she needed their numbers. Our hero said that particular contact should be safe, but she, suspicious, asked how he could know that. With that, Hayashi looked at the phone screen, and her eyes widened in pure shock, because on the screen was the name Kasahara Akari. She then called out to him, and with her female intuition triggered, furiously asked why he had her number. He, in turn, wondered why she was glaring at him so angrily, internally concluding that she was terrifying.